Hey, Voodoo Power listeners. Before we start the show, let me tell you about Strength Coach Pro. Strength Coach Pro is the ultimate coaching companion for passionate strength coaches. Strength Coach Pro is a powerful platform allowing coaches to sequence programs for an entire year, ensuring athletes stay on track. It features a simple drag and drop design for program building. It's easy and efficient, allowing for customized workouts. Another great feature of Strength Coach Pro is the real-time leaderboard feedback. Athletes love competition, creating a fun, engaged, and motivated environment where they can thrive. Strength Coach Pro is trusted by coaches at all levels, from professional to D1, high school, and professional trainers looking for an easy way to streamline programming needs. Whether working with 10 clients or 1,000 athletes, there are no limits to the support of this program. In addition, there's a 14-day trial for coaches where they can explore the platform for themselves. At just $50 a month or $500 a year, the value is unbeatable. Please don't miss your opportunity. Coaches can reach out to Strength Coach Pro for a demo today. Let them work to save you time and elevate your coaching. Now on to the podcast.
Welcome to the Voodoo Power Podcast. Welcome to Plates and Pancakes. We're sitting down today with Arroyo. Coach Arroyo has worked as a private strength and development coach in Naperville, Illinois for the past 13 years. He is the owner of Performance Inspired Training, Inc. Coach Arroyo services a host of clientele ranging from housewives to collegiate and professional athletes who value a strength element in their lives. In his competitive powerlifting days, he boasted a top total of 2210 that placed him third in the 2011 APF Senior National Powerlifting event. So welcome to the show, Coach.
Hey, glad to be back on it.
I did a little bit of a revised bio because you have been on before, but this is going to be kind of a bonus episode because
we're talking about your actual lifting part, which is great.
We work.
Coaches do when they don't coach, they live.
Exactly, and we got to work together and kind of build a plan. And you helped me with getting ready for a powerlifting meet, which I'm never say I'm a great lifter. I'm a pretty average, maybe sub-average lifter, but your help definitely got me a little better than I was.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
So I'm a coach and I work with athletes all the time. Mm-hmm. The one thing that I found maybe was a little tough in the beginning is buying in to what you're selling. And
exactly.
I think that could go for a lot of people. I'm looking at the program you're sending me. I'm trying to see how it lines up with the program I'm already doing, and I'm trying to merge them. So I'm trying to coach myself, but be coached by you.
That's a tough one because we pride ourselves on our coaching knowledge, our expertise, and hell, I should be able to figure this out for myself. And I'll just go back with my lifting career. I did my best lifting when I put it in the hands of someone else, and that guy was Dick Zenzen and all the guys at Zenzen Barbell. Tried to figure, and I was doing the same thing you were doing, and this is actually, it was probably twice as worse because we were all geared lifters, So imagine trying to make sure all your guys have their attempts in. It's like, hey, someone's got to put my shirt on or my briefs on. Or wait a minute, I need a spot on this one. Meanwhile, that guy's up. So that was kind of crazy. But yeah, when I put the programming and the coach, because I had an idea of technique, and I wasn't like a slouch at that point, but I remember just getting to about the 1,900 pound level and then struggling for 3 years to crack 2. And within 6 months, I think of training at Zenzen's, it was cracked near 21. And then it was over 21, mid 21s, and then over to 22, which is my best one. And it was and that was over like a 3-year period. So it paid off.
Which, that was some of it. I had to learn to be coached. I haven't been coached since I was in high school. So I've got to turn the reins over. And I'm sure other coaches can relate because their athletes have to do the same. And you just expect people to do it, but that's not how it works. It's not, you're always holding something back a little. So you worked well with me on that. You understood, I guess, probably from your own experience that was going to happen, but we kind of worked through that rub, I would say.
Yeah. And then also too, and I know it's like the kids, it's a little easier, right? Because we could always call out, how many lifters have you coached? I'm the kid. Well, none. well, what's been your best total? This. It's like, well, here's mine, and here's how many I've coached. With another coach, it's like if I were stupid enough to ask that question, it's like, well, I got this, that. You know what I'm saying? I've coached this many athletes, or I've accomplished this up to this point. So yeah, it's tough to do that, but I think also, kind of relying on, the one thing would be like, okay, that's a pair of eyes, at least from the technical standpoint. Okay, what does this guy see? And then I'll always corroborate that. Okay, here's what I'm seeing. How does it feel? That's the other part of technique that I think it's lost in today, especially at the virtual world, because we were basically doing that right through the Turnkey app. And while I could see stuff on camera, I would always say, how did it feel? And I'll say this with kids all the time. I'll see things a certain way, or I'll see it happen. If like say in a squat, the bar gets a little stuck out of the bottom, the kid powers up, or there's like a little wiggle or something like that, a loss of position, and I'll say, well, how did it feel? It's like, well, it was kind of tough at the bottom, or midway it got kind of stuck. And what I want to do is, okay, do this instead, and I'll put them in position. Now just maybe just with body weight or something like that, or we'll do in the warm up sets we'll hone in on that technique. How does that, or how does this technique? Oh yeah, that was a lot easier, but why was it easier? Like how did it feel? They'll just say easier because it was easier. So you get it was easier, but did you feel like you had pressure here? Did you feel in command of it? Did you feel powerful? Oh yeah, those things. Then that's what we're looking for. If you feel in command of the weight, right, and more powerful through that sticking point, yes, it's easier.
There is a lot to that. I mean, I've made a couple trips to Chicago. We've worked together at your facility. You helped me with some stuff there, and some of that is what I guess I've been lacking as a coach is I'll go somewhere and maybe hang out with some people, but getting somewhere and lifting with somebody
Right.
definitely changes your perspective.
You can only talk about it so much. You can only read about it so much. You can always exchange, but it's like too, and that's like the great thing about you coming out. I think when we box squats and deadlifts, and I just remember like seeing you on the box and you're kind of rocking a little bit too much. I was like, try it like this, and then I would had one hand on your back, one hand in the crook of your hip, and I would kind of push you into position. I would say hold it, and then release, and I would kind of palpate that area. That's the one bad thing, or the one missing. I don't say it's bad, but it's the one missing element of the online style. I can't like reach through the camera and here like this. I mean like this, and then be like, oh, okay, that's right. Like with the sumo deadlift, how many times it take to kind of like just get you to feel in good position so that bar didn't swing around your knees, right? It's like it took like a couple of exchanges to kind of explain it, and then you having to kind of muck it up in training. But if we're able to do that in live time, that cuts down on the amount of time where you can see it, and then you can feel it, and then you start to train it and do it over and over. That's the one thing that's weird about it. You can only coach from you are coaching from afar. You're using your eye, but yeah, I had to take the time to ask, like, how did that thing feel? Like at the bench stuff, we actually got really well. I thought the technique with getting the pressure in the lats and setting up your spinal posture a lot better. That's one thing I did notice where, yeah, and again in live time, I could kind of punch you in the belly and force you to push up, pinch you in the lats, but I couldn't do that. But you got it pretty, like I would say, relatively quickly, despite not having the hands on, so to speak.
So being a remote coach, you have to be more patient with the athlete, and then you have to learn how to express into words better for what you want. Is that how you
Absolutely.
see it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of like do this, try to do it, doesn't get it, keep doing it, or find that phrase that'll stick. Um, so I think looking back, I'll always put maybe in those video exchanges. Because the cool thing about Turkey is you can give that feedback it pretty quickly in live time. I think I just have to suffix every single review of how did that feel, and then you send me back. Okay, I felt like this. Did it feel like? How did it feel in the bottom, middle? How did it feel at the top? Even just the little stuff, like trying to see nuances, like walking out the squat, and okay, tighten up your lats a little bit, something like that, where it can just get you to kind of settle in, take that breath in, time it, boom. Which that's another thing. The squat, like, you got a lot better with. Like you were just condensing that walkout, boom, boom, the step and a half, learning that rhythm and timing, so you didn't waste any time, getting set up and getting into the squats. I think that setup could be, especially with lifters who walk out, even out of a monolift. But if you don't if you don't pick it out the right way, right, and then set the right way, and then you're wobbling, wiggling around, and just trying to find it. That's just a bunch of wasted energy that, unfortunately, it doesn't go into the lift, right? So it's got to be it's the lift starts when your hands hit the bar, and then boom, it's just a routine. It's having the strength of mind to stay to that routine every single time and just layer on the steps. And then the final step is the squat, and then you rack it. Same thing with the bench, and same thing with the deadlift. But those routines have to be practiced over and over and over and over again, just like the lift itself.
Now, I will say a few things that really helped me out tremendously, and I've tried to start adding them with my athletes because I felt like they were so effective, was the Chico wall squat, to really create a good box squat form where your squat and your box squat are the same. That way you're
Yeah.
not, that way you don't have one number that's totally off from the other. So with that Chico wall squat, you had me face the wall, put my toes against the wall, chins on the wall, hands are up like you're going to squat, kick your butt back, run your chest down the wall as you're sending your butt back, and you're
Yeah,
opening your knees.
isn't that hard to do too?
If you're gonna,
Especially when you're used to using the box and then rocking on the box, and that's the thing. I see a lot better. There's a lot better with experienced box squatters, especially the raw squatters who box squat in training. I think they caught on to not rock because they don't, the rocking style was built from geared lifters, so you kind of had the gear to save you. But even still, if you have gear, you don't want the gear to alter good mechanics. You want it to complement it. So why the heck would you use some, you know, completely different technique that's not going to even apply to being in the bottom, being in the bottom of that squat? But that wall squat is kind of like that. It's kind of like that bridge between the box squat and the live one. And at least, obviously, you can't do it loaded, but at least it ingrains the motor pattern. And if you were
and
to do that, maybe with like a belt style type thing, and I could load it a little bit more. And
yeah, I would do it with the K box.
oh wow, there's a good idea.
Yeah, so I'd put the K box against the wall, and then I'd be able to do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
But what I learned from that is a couple things on that Chico wall squat. If you're going to have your athletes do it, which it's very effective, is you better stand behind them because they're going to fall off the wall.
Yeah. Yep.
They
Yep.
almost always will.
Yep.
The other thing I learned from that is if your athletes are coming into a box squat and they're rocking back or they're getting up in their back, well, the load changes. Now the load's not over center of mass, the load's actually behind center of mass.
Mm-hmm.
So their ability to lift heavier weights gone because your bar path has changed. And now
Right.
you're loading the top of the glutes and the lower back more so than if you was in that wall squat position.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's the same thing. If like you get, I think some of the, I think recently, like Mima had posted something about some guy box squatting, the kid was like plopping, collapsing, and then rocking back and rocking forward. Like, yeah, you got 300 or 400 pounds. It's like, no, you didn't. It's like, no, you didn't. Because if you're going to take that to, it's like one of several things that's not your good will happen, or all of it will happen, right? So you give, obviously, you're compressing that spine, right? Um, the spine is moving quite a bit through that, rocking back, rocking forward. You'll see that spine round, and that's, you don't want to do that with any type of lifter of any age or any athlete of any age. So you got that going. Then when you rock back into the box, usually the hips shoot up first and the chest shoots down, and then you kind of finish with a good morning type squat. Well, why the heck would I want to, I mean, I could see doing like a good morning squat as like a drill or something like that, but not when you're trying to put heavy weights. Um, so you're just ingraining a bad motor pattern. And the other thing is, yeah, you can probably do a lot of weight with that style, but you're giving that lifter a false sense of their ability. And then when they have to actually perform it for real, let's say, even if it's a lifter in a meet, they're not going to get that weight in the meet. There's no way. Or let's say if it's a kid who moves on, somehow survives that without injury, and they move on to another level with another coach, and the coach has them do free squats. Like well, what do you squat, kid? It's like 500. All right, load 500 on it. The kid just collapses. I was just actually re-listening to your podcast with Coach Noonan out there, and you had said, more injuries happen with the squat than any other lift, and I would definitely agree, both acute and chronic, right? So, like, even though you won't get injured right on the spot every time, but over time, if you have a bad motor pattern or loading the tissues wrong, yeah, something's going to go haywire. Absolutely.
And if you're coaching that and then you're going to go to a meet, you have to give yourself enough time to gain the confidence in the free squat. If your box squat's right, it's going to carry over, but there's a level of confidence in yourself getting down into depth and coming out that you have to acclimate to. It seems like.
Absolutely. And just like I think Louis Simmons said this years ago in the article, but the box squat should be harder to do than a free squat, right? But for most, it's not. It's actually easier to do because they use some sort of bounce or rock or it's partial range or whatever. And I would like to think the style that we were working with, where you get a full pause, you're in position, and you're holding it. It's almost like a glorified pause squat, right? Except you get a small release of when the tissues are compressed a little bit. It's a little bit of relaxation, although you're not trying to relax. It's just the muscles are compressed. So what happens is they're not going to be on full stretch. So now you got to just push with that raw strength coming up out of the hole. So a box squat should be, more difficult to do, or you should be able to box squat less than meat for sure.
Another thing we did, and I hadn't spent a whole lot of time doing it, was very slow eccentrics into an ISO, into a box squat. Well, you start learning really good positions quickly because it's very uncomfortable to hold a 3 second ISO 2 inches above a box.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's several things going on there, right? So one, it's technical work, right? So you're learning exactly where you need to be. You're learning the position where you're the strongest. One, two, and I remember you saying about you had gained some weight out of nowhere. Well, that time under tension, that's probably how that happened. I think we're using a safety bar too for that one.
We were, and it was
So it's way harder. Yeah, so it's even more so. So imagine just your entire body just getting lit up. But yeah, you'll go to that isometric, you'll hold that. So obviously there's some isometric strength going on in that little area where there could be a possible, sticking point, mini max, whatever terminology you want to use, where you're actually just going to develop strength by doing nothing or holding the weight, right? You're not pushing, you're not pulling, but you're holding the weight. You're learning position simultaneously, and that tension in that weaker joint angle is going to build strength. And that's why everybody does eccentrics and isometrics, and as full a range as they can.
Now, while some of this might be remedial to some people, it's amazing what you pick up as you go on. Now, I'm going to be 45 before too long. I feel like I have pretty decent mobility for a 45-year-old, but you watch a lot of these young athletes and they have none. What I started picking up and through this was if you can open their feet up a little, almost like a sumo squat, maybe not that, or sumo deadlift, maybe not that aggressive, but if you can open their feet up a little bit, it allowed me to drive my knees out more, creating more mobility in my squat where I felt stronger.
Yeah, more room to squat there. Yeah, because and you got to think of it too. Like there's two different there's almost, there's different ways to squat for different purposes. And I look at the powerlifting squat. Obviously, there's rules to it. You got to get below parallel. So you got to kind of create mobility in the or create mobility in the hip enough to do it. Now, if you're flexible enough, meaning like your tib and fib, the screw hole mechanism. Sometimes with a lot of people that gets locked up a little bit. So that's the ability for essentially if I had I don't know if people out there know what the screw home is, but it's basically like when you uh, lock out your knee completely, from the tibia, what'll happen is your tibia and your foot will rotate like this, but it's because the tibia is rotating at that very end. So there's kind of like a so there's just kind of like a flexibility here. Some people have it, some people don't. It's probably developed over some point in time. I used to be pretty good at it. Like I could have my toes relatively straight ahead, but my knees would still be way out. So if you looked at it from the top down, foot would be going like this, and the knee would be going that way for me sometimes. Now, not a lot of people have that mobility, so you have to create it by getting the toe out. Um, and that's just like gets down to like just watching people squat. Two, the other part of that could be if they're very flat footed, right? The ankle's going to collapse in, so those knees are going to be a little bit in while those feet kind of duck out. So you would have to kind of keep those feet ducked out, but you have to kind of artificially lift that ankle up. So that would be some foot strengthening stuff. Your belt squat march would probably help with that. Sled work will probably help with that. And just learning how to actually contract your foot when you do the lift. But yeah, getting those toes out too, especially too. We also got to look at gear versus raw. Probably raw lifters need to do that more because they don't have we don't have the gear that we can just kind of collapse into, right? We can we can keep our toes relatively straight ahead, collapse into the gear if you kind of bounce us out. And I think that point was made by Pavel Satsulin and I think it was Power of the People Professional. And he talked about the styles of squatting for some of the Russian raw guys. The toes out would be more quad emphasis, and then the toes straight ahead, the wider stance would be more hip, and that goes right along with what Louis was saying for a long time as well.
And so talking about mobile, and I've noticed this in athletes for a while, and then the meet, it really jumped out at me. We're asking these athletes to do a bilateral squat.
Mm-hmm.
If you watch a lot of them, they're doing a unilateral squat in a bilateral position.
Yep.
As they go down, they will shift their weight to their dominant leg,
Mm-hmm.
and they will squat on that one leg. You could probably pick the other leg up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a twist in the hip, and then what happens? They go to their dominant leg, they go down. Well, obviously you want to fix that, but if you're in a meet, you have a judge on both sides. So one judge is seeing the hip
Below.
the other one's seeing it high. So you're getting a red light and a white light.
Yep.
Where the problem exists is if you got a young judge that's not quite sure and he sees the other guy red light it, he's going to red light you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you were at depth with one of your hips, but
Mm-hmm.
not the other. But that bilateral deficit, which I see more and more and more in young athletes, has to
Mm-hmm.
get corrected.
Yes. Yeah, totally agree. And actually, a long time ago, I actually coached a lifter who he was an older guy. Well, not that old at the time. He was probably a tad older than I was, which we were in our 30s. But anyway, he was in a terrible motorcycle wreck. So he actually had one leg that was longer than the other because the hips were like this. So when he would squat, it would literally be like exactly what you said. He was still two leg squatting, like he was even, but on one side he just was never going to get down just because uh it was just locked. It's the way his anatomy was. But on the other side, he got right in. So we could always rely on, at least getting one side in the front jump. We got 2 out of 3 white lights. That was like him getting, 3 whites. In that case, it was obviously unfixable because of his injury. But with some of these kids, um, that are basically they might play, they might play sideways sports, something like baseball or softball and throwers. So they're going to have one side that's going to be predominantly like their push side, the other one that kind of is their mobility side, or like a soccer player will kick with one leg. Um, so yeah, so a lot of that's going to be too is you gotta strengthen the obliques equally. So you can kind of see it a little bit, like it's just stupidly simple drill, but just watch how they side plank. And if they side plank, and I know it's from the side, it's going to look weird, but if they're if they side plank, yeah, everybody side planks or the regular plank, and you can see stuff happen all the time. But if they side plank and you kind of see like the shoulder dip into the hip, even though they're side planking like this, and you'll see the belt line and the shoulders like this, then that's an oblique leak, right, from the one side. So you got to try to get them to kind of tighten up their glutes, and then you just put them in position and try to get them to either push that oblique open and the other one closed. It's kind of like not unlike working with somebody with scoliosis, right? You got to lengthen one side and strengthen the other. So that might be something where, like, in between lifts, you'll watch that happen. And then whatever, like you talked about a hip shift like this, and that'll, if you looked at it from the backside, right, it'll be like this. So like one side looks like it's doing a side crunch, and the other side looks like they're open. Well, for the open, try to get them into that side plank and crunch that down. But don't do anything with the other side. See if you can change that. So it might be stemming from the midsection, from the trunk, core area. Some people will call it. And then obviously just getting them doing your basic stuff like your step ups, your lunges, your reverse lunges, your foot elevated single leg squats, stuff like that will help out. And even if you can even use those as diagnostics too, because like you get them on that one weaker leg, and if they start to get wobbly, it's like, oh crap, we got to find a way to right that ship. But probably I would start from if it's something like that side to side, it probably is a midsection issue. And I've seen that happen quite a bit. And our kid will come up and they'll kick out. Sometimes it happens too. Like the way down they look great, and they come on up and you see that shift happen. And it's just yeah, they're pushing off the one leg and the other leg's not doing, not loading at all. Um, so that'll be something. And that for me, that's just probably they got tension too late, right? They're trying to get tension when they catch the bar. Like, oh, I gotta get tight all of a sudden, rather than you got to have tension the whole time. So on that, I might tell that kid purposely to squat slower down and up, and feel the even, feel yourself being even. That's where you can incorporate that with a wall squat as well.
One thing that you programmed in, I think everybody has it to a certain extent, that one dominant leg, and you really have to be aware of what your body's doing so you can keep it even. We did a lot of single leg Hatfields, and what I
Yeah.
noticed was that with that is you can get used to carrying a lot of weight on your back, so you're not freaked out when you are in a regular squat, but then you can also develop that deficit. I mean, is that something that you've learned over the years that can help shore that up? So you're running a conjugate, that's a weak spot. That's your accessory, is your single leg Hatfield, to try to help that squat go up.
Yes, yes. So it's I don't classically. So if you look at, and we did those early on in the training cycle, right? And then we kind of scrapped them for the two-legged after that. So it's exactly that. Like you're trying to train the deficit within the deficit. So if you have, and I didn't know you had a one leg balance. What I did was I kind of assumed it. Not to mention, it allows us to kind of use that as a preparatory exercise for the two-legged assistance. So I think we did like high bar pauses. Like we did the single leg, we did the split squat, then we went to reverse lunges, then we went to high bar pauses. So that split squat was to set up the reverse lunge to set up the high bar pause. And the way I look at that is, yeah, let's get as strong as we can on one leg, so then we're on two, that deficit's gone, and then now everything's even
I would say it worked well. I didn't feel like I was in a one leg dominant situation, on the platform. And I felt way more comfortable with the load on my back because we'd done so many Hatfields. So you're just always carrying a heavier load than probably what you would normally just on a free bar squat.
Absolutely. And the cool thing about the Hatfield is you're loading that split position, and the front leg isn't the only leg getting loaded. So you're loading that back leg too. So with the back leg, you're getting a stretch of the toes, right? You're getting the Achilles heel a little bit, right? So it's kind of like getting calf work in. At the same time, you're stretching that back hip flexor. So it's acting like a loaded stretch in a way. If you're doing it, where your back leg's back enough, and you're not quite as uh, like there's another way to do it where your knees kind of where if the back knee touches the floor, it's kind of forward of the hip or right under. I like going a little bit more length there, just so you can get that leg back there and open up that hip flexor, because that's usually a problem spot for most lifters. They're always like tight hip flexors, because we're always flexing, with their butt sticking out, or gut sticking out, right? So if we can get that back hip flexor and that back in the glute to coordinate, it's only a benefit to us.
Along with all that, now we've talked the squat tremendously the last few
Mhm.
minutes. But on top of all that, you had programmed in a huge amount of back work, which I thought I was getting a lot of back work in programming for myself, but
Mhm.
we hit it from every angle possible. And
Oh yeah.
one of the worst that probably built my back the best was a snatch grip deadlift.
I knew you were going to bring that one up. Yeah, yeah, the snatch grip deadlift. Um, yeah. So here's my angle on overall back work, and I know this is like Ed Cohn had a dedicated back day, after his deadlifts, and Louis Simmons, you would do he called lat work every day. But the back, okay, is one of those things there's a reason why, if you were an international lifter and the Russians would come up to you, and I remember reading stories about this, and they would, Russian lift, he would kind of give you a hug, or whatever, grab, put the hand around the low back to know how, just kind of sizing up the competition. So if the guy had no spinal erectors, oh, we got him. So you know what I'm saying. So if he did though, it's like, okay, we're kind of in for a battle. So that the back, the entire posterior chain. A lot of strength coaches are going to use that term instead, but you're looking at from the traps to calves to a lifter is like literally it's the most important area of the body for everything, not just athletes, obviously, because it's your posture. And just, with lat anatomy, right? The anatomy of the lats, it's the only muscle in the body that connects top to bottom and front to back. There's no other muscle that does it, right? And the lats are so important with connecting shoulder posture, the spinal posture to hip posture. So anything you do, the snatch grip deadlift, obviously that one, because you're so wide with that grip, and you're having to sweep that bar in. You have to really kind of keep it close and sweep it in. Well, probably within the first week, let me guess, traps, middle traps, spinal erectors, and lats were all lit up all the time. It's from that. So we use that, and it's kind of like deficit deadlift without having to stand on a deficit, even though we did stand on a deficit too. So we kind of got that quad work. And I just remember that lift also being a favorite of Charles Pollock. For it was for him, it was like a combination of VMO work and then posterior chain at the same time, because you got to push it and then you pull it at the end. So in the end, that's like, if you hear Ed Cohn talk about deadlift technique, he goes, it's a push and a pull. There you go. That's one great way to train it if you have a trouble getting a feel, because there is going to be some quad extension coming off the ground. Like a regular, if you're a conventional deadlifter, it's going to look like a leg extension, because you're gonna push. So if this is, our quad here, we're gonna push like this, and then kind of push to that RDL position and then come through. But you still got to push into that position. So it's important that you kind of got to get in a position to feel it. And I know you being a sumo deadlifter, it's all posterior chain groin, essentially your inner thighs that are working there. So you're just trying to leverage, and everybody sumos these days too. My God, it drives me nuts. But you're just basically wedging it in, getting the hips through, and boom. So you'll have a neglect of certain muscles that are still going to be important, because if you can build those muscles, that sumo gets way easier, or the conventional gets way easier.
While you think the deadlift should be just a pretty simple lift, I think of all the lifts, I struggle with that the most. And when it's right, you can feel what Ed's saying. You can feel the push. And when the push is there, you can lift, it feels like you could PR with whatever you wanted to put on the bar. But some days it's a struggle to find that push.
Yeah.
It turns more into, like we talked about a lot, turns into an RDL. Well, how strong
Yeah.
are you?
And that, yeah. And that's the tricky thing where like, sometimes what you feel is good is like, okay, is this right? But then it just doesn't fly. So get into a different position to feel. It might be a tweak of maybe the stance out a little wider. I think it took us a while to kind of just do that with our feet, but that'll open things up right away. And by the time I think we discovered that, it was a little bit later in the training cycle, where we just didn't get a lot of practice time to get that feel.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
part of that's my mistake, because I'm trying to, again, and that's the thing with taking the videos, is if you're taking it from a certain angle or certain things that you can't see. So if it was like the straight ahead angle, I probably would have caught it, but I wasn't even thinking of like, why the heck can't, I would have boggled my mind, say, how are we getting around that bar? Because we made some good like we were doing the box deadlifts, which I thought were great, because I was like, okay, cool. Now we get used to making that bar float in position, then you push it, then you pull it in, and then after a while, I just kind of missed a couple of things in there, I guess. So, but it's tough to see on camera sometimes.
And then once I got it, I got it. It's those toes have to
Oh,
be out so that you can open your knees up to get
exactly.
your
You
knees
got to get the
parallel to
hips
the bar.
close to that bar as quick as you can, and if
And
they're too far back, it's done.
and sitting back in it, I'd always heard Dave Tate talk about that if you can sit back in it, you take your body weight off the bar.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a lot easier said than done. Where
Oh
you
yeah,
where you trust to sit back in that bar, pull it against your shins,
yeah,
and let it kind of pop itself up, and,
yeah.
and use the leverage of essentially turning your hips into a fulcrum.
Hmm.
You can draw it out on a whiteboard all you want, but getting it to make that happen is very tough.
Right, and again, going back to the back work, right? So you got to think of all the connections that have to make that happen. So if you go from the hip, go in a reverse order from the hip down to the bar, you have all the muscles of the hip, you have the low back, you have the lats, the rhomboids, the traps. Okay, then go back and are the arms in the right position? Are the hands strong enough? Are the lats able to keep that bar right where it needs to be, and then pull it in even more? So all of those things got to be connected and right on. Sometimes too, that's just it could be like a timing issue. Like if you're not leaning back on it, but like people think they can be leaning back on it, but if you don't have things, if you don't have 100% tension essentially from your butt cheeks to your fingernails, then you probably don't have it, right? And it takes a while to know what that feels like, whether you're a hook gripper or over under. You got to you got to know what that feels like.
Now, through doing all this, my deadlift went through the roof. I was sure I was going to pull over 5, and that
Yeah,
would have
so was
been.
I. I was like, you're going to be right there.
And what we found out through it all was, at my age, we couldn't handle the speed at what we were going. We were running two essentially heavy lower days, two heavy upper days,
You're right.
and somewhere in there it caught up with me and crashed, and we went
Yeah,
from
yeah,
we went from close to 500 to 425,
yeah.
and learning that as you get older that you cannot keep up with the young guys in the gym, and we turned a 7-day week into a 10-day workout week, and that seemed to help quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think moving forward, but that's the thing too, I want to, in the process of learning, okay, you love training 4 days a week. That's what you want to do. Okay, cool. We'll do that. And then we kind of see where things go. Can we survive it? You're a drug-free lifter in the mid 40s. Probably the classic 4 day a week uh, conjugate-esque model is like you really got to be on with your loading all the time. So like even if you deadlift on a heavy day, it's not going to be as heavy. So the way I see it, it's like, okay, why, something like a deadlift, why waste it? And that's the other thing with Zenzen barbell that helped me. I was doing the 4 day a week classic stuff, total get stuck. I go out to DeKalb, which is another 45 minutes from the Naperville area, 3 days a week. And we go, and I'm like, all right, coach, what do we lift? Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I go, well, what about the fourth day? He goes, we don't do a fourth day. He goes, when's our fourth day? He goes, next week. And I'm like, what do you mean it's next week? It's like, next week. He goes, we lift on a 9-day week. I'm like, what? So at first I didn't get it. And then I was just like, all right. And the way it rolled through, it was just perfect. It was just absolutely perfect because a lot of it was you get a whole weekend to recover. Then every heavy day you're just chomping at the bit because it's like 10 days out as opposed to 7. Looking back, it makes complete sense because sometimes you'd come in on a heavy day each week and it's like just don't have it and going light anyway. It's like, well, I'd rather just instead of just going light and wasting the day, you know. So now I've got to wait another 7 days to do it. So now it's a 14 day, and then you just don't get enough in. Rather than just okay, that 9 or that 10 day, that's like a perfect. That's a perfect week anyway because every month is about 30 days. Well, it makes sense. three weeks a month. But that's how when we faced it out, that's how we did it. Rarely did we ever have to deload. And I think even Donnie Thompson, talking with him over there, he talked about doing, that being the best way to do it. Even though I think he, out of necessity, had to lift, the same every day just because you can only, expect help on certain days. Like the weekend, it always used to be like that in the old days, like with France barbell. The squat bench deadlift every Saturday was like doing a meet every Saturday. So that was like, but every single Saturday. Um, I could never train it like that, but that's just how they did it because people work during the week. Saturday's the big day. We're gonna have all the help to do everything. So practically it made sense. But when we switched to that 9 day, like that was the thing that it took my total up for sure. And then because you can train with more intensity, train with load, train with just enough volume that you need, but you had that purpose on that day and you did it. On your dynamic days were still dynamic. Now the way we did our dynamic days was we would use dynamic squats to warm up for the deadlift, and the deadlift was heavy 3 out of every 4 workouts, and the fourth workout was speed deadlift. So we really speed deadlift basically once every, well, let's see, for a whole month. So yeah, for 10, 20, 30 days, we would do a heavy deadlift build up, and then we did a speed deadlift, and that was usually deficit or off the floor, and then cycled through. And the way we did that was it was pin 3, pin 2, pin 1, speed deadlift. And looking back, it's like we should have done something like that with you. And I think the next round that we do, that's what we're going to do, because now you can get used to handling those heavier loads with a progressive distance of going down, down, and then do a speed deadlift and cycle it through. So you can still do your box, so your speed squats to warm up for it. Or another way I used to do it with my good training partner at the time. He was an 800-pound deadlifter, sumo with a hook grip. But he trained with Brent Mikesell back in I think Spokane, Washington when he was out there. But they would do a lot of good morning and 45-degree hypers before they deadlifted. So kind of winning S style, but they would actually go heavier with it. So you would do like a 5 heavy sets of 5, or for the 45-degree hyper, you do like 10s or something like that, couple sets, and then you would go deadlift, because in the meet, your low back's going to be worn out anyway by the time you get to after the squat and arching the bench press. Kind of had to simulate it to a certain extent without killing it. But that was one of his secrets.
Now, through this whole thing, the one thing I picked up so much, and I'm able to help my athletes better. So it was great that I kind of went somewhere else to get help so that I could see things so I could help my athletes. One thing I picked up really quickly from you is the bar path and the bench press. And a lot of lifts get missed because you're pushing away from the rack and not getting back to the rack with the bar. When it gets heavy, get it back to the rack.
Mm-hmm.
And where it really shows up is the incline bench press. That bar, you have to fight it back because that bar will drift on you or your athletes, and they'll miss a lift where if you was there to coach that bar path, they would have hit it. It wasn't because they wasn't strong enough. It was because the path of the bar got to be more than they could handle.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that bar path, it's universal. And I'm forgetting, there's a bench study done a long time ago, but it basically just said, I forget who ran that study, but it was basically a universal study on bench pressers from like the 80s. So some of the all-time greats, it was like, Mike Bridges, Kaz Meyer, Mike McDonald, all those names. Back then, all those guys, it was old school. I don't even think the shirts were around or anything significant, but it was just all roads lead to Rome, and eventually that bar, no matter how it started, always went back on the racks. It was always a smooth drain groove. It was up in here, or it was straight back and then up. There was always some sort of groove back there. And if you look at how the anatomy is, and this was probably more prom that bar path was probably more exaggerated and better manipulated by the bench pressers from Metal Militia. I don't know if you remember those guys. But Sebastian Burns, Bill Crawford, just a legendary bunch of, and they were equipped benchers. And so they used the denim shirts to their advantage. They were also very strong guys too, but it was a very, very meticulous technique where they used the term cutting the bar, and then the masters at it were the big iron guys, because those guys had Sean Frankel at 198 mentioned over 800, something crazy, but they would start out where they would go straight in, almost like a bodybuilder style bench, right? To about a third, maybe halfway down, to load the chest plate of the shirt. Then they would start tucking it toward the belly like this, and then it was everything after that was boom, up and back. It was all straight back toward the rack. Now the way they would do that is elbows in and then elbows would go out. And if you think about it, it makes sense. It's kind of like the jerk technique. You're going to be here, dip, you get the bar under, and then it's through, and the elbows come out. So you're essentially doing a jerk style with a bench press. And the jerk is nothing more. It's not a. I'm not going to say you don't have to be strong to do it, but you're manipulating the body structure to kind of catch the bar. Make it efficient. Now this with bench press, it's the same thing, because you want to start it. If you took the bar and started it, and your arm was like this or that, and you see it all the time with the kids, because when you take it out, it's over their eyes.
Yeah.
They're shaking with it or whatever. Toughest thing I have is like, get your humerus and your forearm straight there, straight down through the shoulder. And then from there, it's going to come more. It's hopefully going to come a little bit toward your belly, because it's just, you can get the lats involved, get the elbows tucked in a little bit. The raw is going to be a little bit different than a shirt bencher. They're not going to be quite as pronounced. But it's always going to come back over because you got to get it back in that point of leverage. Because if it's straight there, you can hold the weight forever. If you can't get back over, you're not. So imagine trying to push it straight up. It's like triceps, but then you're missing the delts, front delts. You're missing the pecs are out of the bottom. But then you're just everything that can bring that bar back into that key position of leverage, straight up and down, isn't going to work. Or if you're back over, it's trying to touch the high chest to come up, the bodybuilding style of bench. There's a reason you used a lot of weight because you can't. So yeah, you got to get that bar groove one, obviously, to just to maximize leverage, and it takes a lot of practice. But yeah, every single bench presser you see, you can watch them closely. They're doing the same thing. They're just grooving that bar back toward it. The only thing that'll change is obviously the humerus length and the form length will change. If that's different, that'll change when the time that happens, but it's all going back toward the rack.
The toughest thing I had to put together, and I didn't put it together till almost the very end. You come out of the rack, you settle, you pull the bar apart. That's all pretty simple. We all understand that.
Right.
Pulling that low rib cage up into the bar and then trying to bend the bar all the way down until you touch. So
yeah,
even an empty bar, me and you have discussed this, you should barely be able to get an empty bar to touch.
Yeah, even without a shirt, correct.
Yeah, because you're wedged in so tight, you're pulling, you're almost trying to bend the bar around you the whole way down, and that's where it gets tough. Is because your mind starts thinking about the weight, it starts thinking about the press, and you just forget to bend the bar. You lose your wedge, you lose whatever recoil you're building to blow out of the bottom.
Exactly, and you need to, and that's kind of borrowed from a shirt technique. But being a raw lifter, you got to create your own shirt. The only way to do that is with pressure and muscle mass, obviously. But yeah, you got to create that pressure and create that position, create that leverage system. But it takes a lot. Like shirted benching is a whole different animal in a way, but at the same time they're the same because you got to be a master at handling pressure. Because once you lose the pressure, you lose the position, you lose the posture, you lose power. That's all there is to it.
And you have to be able to think.
Yeah.
I'm all for the VBT, and we do a lot of things here fast, but eventually you have to get to a point where you're lifting enough weight that the athlete, lifter, whoever can think through the lift and slows it down. I spent a lot of time welding. I spent a lot of time teaching guys to weld, and you cannot learn how to weld until it slows down. What you're seeing slows down and you understand what's happening. The bench press seems to be very much the same. And until you can slow it all down with heavy weight in your hand, it's going to be a struggle.
Yeah, and the ways to do that, if you don't, obviously you put more weight on the bar, but there's a point where you can only handle so much. So that's where that quote unquote those isometrics and eccentrics, that tempo work comes into play. So even like what was the one drill I think we did that you hated? It was the 3-position eccentric isometric.
Yeah, so it was 3 seconds to a position, 3 seconds isometric, and then you lowered 3 seconds.
Down low, another 3, and then all the way down. And it was like just try to do the thing about that. That's 6 seconds. That's 18 seconds of just building pressure, and then up, and then first rep, it blew up, and then you try the second rep, and that bar speed slows even more. Now you're forced to think because now you created load without loading the bar. It was just pure muscular tension. You wore everything out. You wore out all those fast twitch fibers. Now it's like, okay, what do you got? Or you wore out all those slow twitch fibers. Now you got to work like, oh, what do I got left here? Well, I'm trying to push with all my might, but now it's like, okay, boom, I get stuck, fail. Where do I got to go? I got to go back to my leverage point. So that's where it's got to be your drive and your shoulders back into the bench, right? You're trying to get under it, but at the same time push it back over, so it gets right over those shoulders. But yeah, those types of drills are critical, and those are things that you can put on the classical dynamic day, where to me it becomes I like using the term that Sweet Burns use, a technique day. And for amateur lifters, that's going to be more or less what you probably may want to opt for than a classic dynamic effort day, because you still want to, the key for them is going to be technique, not necessarily bar speed and power. On that sort of day. And even and I remember just thinking in because I saw, I was thinking about this interview, but there's James Thinker Smith had an article, and I remember weird things about articles, but he had he had something about a bench press article, and he talked about instead of the dynamic effort method, using a version of a repetition effort method for amateur lifters, and it was more like 4 sets of six or 6 sets of four or 3 sets of six, something like that, where you'd use some slower tempos, just try to get used to, but the weights weren't that heavy. So, in other words, you have to be strong enough in the first place to get something out of a dynamic effort. Because other than that, because anybody could just use a lightweight speed, but you'll see it with the kids too. It'll be, 3 different reps will go 3 different ways. I'd say slow them down and get three reps going the one way that they could never screw it up. Do that with a technique day. You can use your eccentrics, your isometrics, pure isometrics, the combos that we were doing, or even the manual overload eccentrics, which I think we tried to do, but you didn't have any help on that day, so you had to use the weight releases. But having your training partner push down on the bar and then releasing it up, it's another way to do it. You overload that eccentric and then boom, you just pop it up. That'd be good for ball players too, right? Because then you can manipulate the pressure a little bit, get them kind of in a wrestling match, so to speak. But for a lifter, that would be just pushed down. It's just a version of a weight releaser, but manual.
And that's the thing with the guys here. I just started not worrying about what the eccentric was doing. Wedge in, go down, stay tight, and then explode off your chest. And the velocity was measured off the chest. I don't care what the eccentric's doing. If you can wedge in and you get 3 reps at high velocity and that bar path is right, we're going to be okay.
Yeah, that's the key though. That bar path has got to be right. And then that's the thing. If you do it, if the bar path is right and everything's in the slot and all the pressure is built, you'll even get a fast bar speed without even trying to do it. Right? It'll just pop.
The one thing we programmed that caught me off guard, because I always thought of it as a geared lift exercise, which I know Michael Fahey down there in Florida does it with his guys and has great success. So I don't know why I'd kept away from it for so long, was block presses. We did a 4 board, and then we did a 4 board to a 2 board. So alternating.
Oh yeah, the infamous board press cycle. Yeah.
Yeah, we did 3 board to 1 board. You think you're going to be really strong with that lockout, but you're fighting bar path, and you're fighting some really heavy weight in a short range of motion. And that took a little bit of getting used to. It's not a straight up press off the board. On 4 boards, you're going immediately back to the rack.
Right. And that's the key. That board press cycle is exactly that. Like you're going to, again, we kind of front loaded a weak area. The weak area could actually be the position itself, or just the ability to handle heavier loads. That's why I like using that as like kind of like an off-season builder, because and then you'll contrast it, right? So you're not just doing all of your sets of 4 board and then 2 board. You're going 4 board, 2 board, 4 board, 2 board, 4 board, 2 board, or 3-1, 3-1, 3-1 in the next phase. And that's one actually that I used, and I developed that about 20 years ago, and it kind of stemmed from a Poliquin idea of using the 1-6 method. We'll do a heavy single, then do a set of 6, then a single, and you kind of wave those weights up a little bit. So I was like, why not do that with boards? Let me try it. And that thing took me from a sub 4 to a mid 400 raw bench at the time. And I was just like, oh, okay, there's got to be something to it. Because you're contrasting it, heavy weight with a more moderate weight, but you're still grooving it in that point. And like you said, yeah, it's got a short range of motion. Like you better be in the right group, because if you're not, it's going to stay on the board or you're just going to fly in your face, one of the two. But it seemed to work for a lot of guys too.
We've covered a lot of stuff, so we'll kind of get to some of these other ideas before we wrap up, and we'll see how that kind of works out. But the one thing we didn't take into consideration is I was taking 5 of my guys with me. That put me.
I thought you were just lifting.
Yeah, and that put me coaching while trying to lift. And
yeah.
So I had one kid there. He was a 136. Well, I was 200. So he was lifting in the first flight. Well, I was a couple flights away, but I might have a lifter in the middle flight too.
Oh, geez, yeah.
So it seemed like I'd have to hit the majority of my warm-ups with my light guy and then try to keep warm for my set because I knew I was going to have to wrap his knees. I was calling his numbers. I was watching his lifts. And then we hit a group.
Yeah, there's no way you can warm. Yeah, oh, wow.
And I just did a Josh Bryant idea. So I got kind of warm and then I go hit ISOs. And it worked really good because then it didn't seem like I'm expending so much energy in the warm-up.
Mm-hmm.
And the ISO's holding it. Now, we hit a couple sets where 4 guys and me were in the same flight. Well, that was the squat. So I'm wrapping myself and I'm wrapping them. That is a lot of knees to wrap, and it's a very tight schedule, and you're trying to get them on the platform when they need to get on the platform without having them sit there wrapped too long so they lose their feet. That took more out of me than I ever could have imagined. I did not know I would be so drained after that, that was a hard lesson learned, I guess.
Yeah, it's a two-headed monster of stress because it's the actual physical stress with the hands. Because you're trying to wrap, and me, you're wrapping pretty tight, I gather, because you want to get the most weight possible. And the other thing is like you're worried about the timing. Now, here's one thing with timing is I've had it before where like you're even with the geared stuff. So guys fully geared up, boom. A lifter in front of them gets hurt. Now all of a sudden, oh crap. That's going to take whatever, 5, 10, 15. I've even seen these injuries 20 minutes. All right. So the guy's got to get unwrapped, and then you're trying to calm down, and then you're trying to calm your lifter down. And I'm sure like when you're wrapped, like getting your knees wrapped is a stressful experience. Like meaning the guy who's getting wrapped or the girl who's getting wrapped, like that shit hurts. Right. So you're trying to like keep them calm at the same time, getting some feedback from them. It's like, okay, I want to make it too tight where it makes it feel so painful that they can't even do. They're not even thinking about the lift; or just thinking about get these freaking knee wraps off me. Now I was a whip when it came to it too, because I hated getting my knee wraps. I just hated it. You guys are, come on, you can take it. You got a big lift, like you could take more. Like I honestly don't like that. I didn't really train with them that much. And then, for the heavy sets, obviously we did, but I freaking hated getting my knee wraps. And if somebody that I didn't know wrapped a little bit too tight, I'm just like, back off. And then you're just kind of fighting with that. No, you need more. It's like, no, like back off. I don't want that, So that could be stressful if you don't know your knee wrap. Now, if you've been wrapping these kids' knees, obviously that saves a lot of grief, but at the same time, you're worried about that timing. Stress on your own hands. Heck, by the time you wrap your knees, it's like, what the heck? It's like you're just shot. Your hands are just swollen at the end of the day. And then that sets up, it's tough. It's tough to lift after that, all lifts. But yeah, it's like, that's, a lot of lessons learned, I'm sure.
One of the biggest lessons I learned from it was, as much as I love lifting, I love coaching more. I hung with them in my numbers. None of them blew me away, so I don't got to listen to a bunch of talk in the gym.
Yeah.
I was able to help them, and it is an awesome feeling helping somebody get the numbers they want. And you're there, and you're wrapping them. You're talking through their numbers. So I sent you a copy of this. I sent a couple other copies of this, and I may have to do like a YouTube video and kind of show it, but we come up with some Google Sheets. Whenever, if you got 6 lifters, me included, you sent me the numbers you thought I should have. So I ran those. the Google Sheets, I set them up where you type in the goal weight to be lifted. So that's all you have to do. If I know I want to hit a 415 squat, 430 squat, I type that in the goal. It spits me out 85%, 92%, 97%, and 100%. So I have a range. I know that I want to open with that 85. But not only does it spit it out, it spits it out in kilos that can be loaded on the bar. That was the toughest thing of that whole dang thing. Is just because it's kilos doesn't mean you can load it on the bar.
Right. Yeah.
So it spits that out. It tells me what an 85 is. It tells me what a 92 is. Well, then when I hit 97 and I hit 100, the second lift tells me where I'm going. Is the second lift red? Because if it's red, not great, speed was slow, I'm gonna lay up and I'm gonna take this lift in the red. If it flew, hey, let's push it. Let's send it to the green. And then we'll go that way. At the same time, I set it up where you type your body weight in. So you have a running coefficient number on where you're at.
Which is key, especially with when you're going for one records or a national title or something like that. But to have something like that beforehand, rather than at the beat, because I've been stuck as a coach too. It's like, then we go up here and we stay, and then okay, I got to do in order to break, it's got to be 2.5 more kilos more. Can they handle it? But I have that kind of fail safe there. Okay, it's going to be this or this. Boom, put it in, take it to the expediter or to the table and just do it, and just have your lifter. Just I don't know how many times I go shut up and lift. I'll do the number, kind of deal at meets. But yeah, it is more gratifying helping that. Coaching for me at meets was funner than lifting in a lot of ways. I had fun lifting, but not as much coaching because you can still joke around and stuff. But yeah, having that Google sheet thing was amazing.
And I printed them all out. I printed them on heavy stock. I had them on like a shower ring. So I got a kid up. I got his number pulled up. I know what his opener is. Let's watch it. He comes off the platform. We're back there discussing it. Let's stick with the plan. That moved well, but let's stick with the plan, see what the next one does. And then you just run through all your lifters. You're making check marks if they hit it, check marks if it was slow. And man, that was so much fun that my numbers kind of, as much work as I put into it, my numbers didn't mean as much as getting a kid a state record or making sure that his attempts were where he wanted them to be.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because you're just lifting and kind of like, well, I could still hang with you.
Which, had I not took on the stress of coaching and took on the stress of rapping, I think we walk away with a higher total. But
for certain, yeah, I had no idea we were gonna until I kind of had some idea. It's like, wait, isn't he taking the kids with him, and who's handling them? It's like he's handling them. It's like, oh, I guess I've been spoiled because I've always like, if I'm coaching, I'm coaching. If I'm lifting, I'm lifting. I learned that lesson obviously hard too because I would do what you did, and then it would just be like, after a while, like the team and I made a pact. It's like, look, it's like one, it's like we can't do both and succeed. So it's going to be like, you do one meet, I'll do the other. We coach each other. It's like, oh, okay, and things work much better like that.
Well, and the kids, I've got great kids. They understood the sacrifice that was made for them to hit their numbers, because when it was all over and the dust had settled, we're sitting there talking, and that was the one takeaway they had was, we will learn how to wrap our knees so you never have to do this again.
Yeah.
I mean,
they can wrap each other's knees. Yeah, that should happen in training. So you guys kind of, when you guys squat together, when it's time to start wrapping knees, then just have them. I don't think. I mean, there are very few lifters. Ed Cohn's one of them that got away with wrapping their own knees. But if you could have somebody do it, it's so much better.
I got mine down. I'm not going to say I'm great at it, but I knew what it took to get the wraps I wanted. If I wanted 4 coming up my knee, I knew what it was going to take for me to pull it to get it there. Where if you take somebody that's not good at it, you're going to get 3 one time, you're going to get 4 another, or you take a chance of them coming untied. There's just a little bit of risk involved, but it worked out. I got really good at wrapping knees this week.
Yeah. A lot of practice.
A lot of practice. You figure you wrapped at least 18 knees, not counting what you did in the warm-up room. I mean, 6 lifters, 3 attempts. That's 18 sets of knees.
Ooh.
Well, that's actually 36 knees.
Oh, wow.
Not counting what the warm-up room was. So I was
man, be shot after that.
I was spent, but I hit a PR in a squat, and that was
that looked good. Like you were from the videos you showed me in your previous week, it looked like 2 different squats because you were just aggressive coming in and out of the hole, and then any sticking point you had, you just pushed through. Like you didn't have any hesitation or anything.
the last thing we'll kind of hit on, and I'll let you get off here. But the one thing I do know about me and lifting is I struggle with the arousal of, like Chuck Vogelpool. They had to talk him off of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That Dave Tate talked about having to calm him down. I'm almost the other way. I almost can't find that spot to really move that heavy weight mentally. And I know that. I understand that. I understand where I am in life, and I understand how that goes.
Mm-hmm.
But for a lifter like that, what can they do to overcome that deficit?
Yeah, that was me too. So thinking along the same line, we're both thinkers, trying to think our way through stuff, problem solve. And especially too, like obviously you're coaching at the same time, so your mental energy is spent doing that. So it's like by the time you get to your left, you're like, okay, what do I got left? It's like, not much in terms of mentally, right? So for me, it was like it's crazy because like I only tapped into it a couple of times because I hit PRs, but it would you almost have to get internally violent somehow. You just got to like get mad at something for the sake of just for the sake of getting that arousal up. I had trouble doing that because I was always having a good time when I was doing it. It's like I don't want to be mad. This is fun. Um, you gotta yeah, or you just gotta tap into um instead of thinking like technique, all the technical work thinking is done. You just gotta get into your yeah. It's tough to explain. You just gotta kind of let it all go, and just freaking let it fly. Like I don't know how else to explain it because it's something that's kind of unexplainable to get in that headspace. All I'll say is this though: when I trained with Travis Mash for a little bit, he goes, he goes. All of the great deadlifters that he knew were all crazy. Like they all had rap sheets, records, whatever. Himself including at the time, I think. But he can correct me if I'm wrong. But he goes, "You got to be crazy." He goes, "You don't have to be crazy to deadlift, but it helps." And he was over 800, and literally, I go back. It's like, yeah, all the guys that had these crazy lifts were like all my training partners, which you know, some of them are dead now, and some of them went to jail. But those were all the guys that were actually pretty good lifters. I was like, damn, I'm almost too nice to do this sport. Or at that level. But I think like you can think your way through training, but essentially there's almost got to be there's almost Ed Cohn kind of trained himself, and if you look at him on the platform, he was very internal. You could tell he was very internally motivated by something. What that was, I don't know what it was, other than just taking on the next challenge. Um, for me, it was just I had to get momentarily violent. Like momentarily, I had to be the biggest jerk on the planet, but inside my head. Um, a lot of lifters, I think, have trouble turning that off on the outside, so they're just outside of the platform. Um, but yeah, you just gotta. It sounds weird, but you almost gotta love something so much, you got to find something to hate so you can just like get aggressive somehow. And that's even me just explaining it like that probably shows like how I lacked so much of that. Because a lot of guys, it was just reactive, it was intuitive. Um, but yeah, you have to get in that sort of. It's a very weird headspace because like we never tap into it because we're always in training mode. You almost have to might program a workout where like it's meet day today, MFers, let's go for it. It's like, okay, we're kind of, you just let everything go because you got to always rely on your training that will always take you to that reactive level.
Yeah, it's something that I may have to take to practice more.
Yeah.
It changed the way your mindset. I know Dave Tate talks about going to the void, and
Mhm.
I know you're really elite guys can turn it on and turn it off. And I know talking to Javorek, he used to talk about in that podcast I did with him is they would get those guys amped up and then see how quick they could relax them, and then amp them up, and then see how quick they could relax them. And
Mm.
it's something that has to be practiced, or
Yeah.
I'm never going to get it.
Right. And that was probably my downfall. So I never practiced it because I was always coaching, coming up with the next work training plan, whatever. Thinking about it from that mechanical standpoint, but that mental standpoint is where you got to go, and I think that's what separates the good from the great from the all time greats. It's how deep they can go with it and use it to their advantage, for sure.
I think there's some truth in what you're saying. So when I'm at the meet, I'm watching what's going on. I'm seeing if the patterns I see in my gym are the patterns that are going on across the country. How can I make my Google Sheets better? How can I coach this better?
Yeah, yeah,
My lifts are just going to be what they are, and finding where that road kind of intersects on being a good coach, but also being able to lift the weight I want is going to have to be practiced a little bit harder.
yeah, yeah. And it may just take a little like one session a month. You take it like a little off season or whatever. One session a month, you just kind of have like a that's kind of taps into some of these training these private training entities where they'll have like a theme day, and it's more for them. It's more like fun or whatever else, or some CrossFit's notorious for having different types of workouts that they do, but it's more to create that experience of them doing something all hard together. In the case of powerlifting, it's just like, okay, today we go for it, kind of deal. Pick a lift and just go, just have fun with it, and just go crazy.
I think confidence plays a huge part in there too. And
Oh yeah,
you,
yeah,
you got to believe that you can move 500 pounds on a squat bar to be able to move 500 pounds or whatever it is you're trying to do. So if there's any little bit of doubt, and maybe I fight some of that some too, you know, I
yeah,
had some really big pulls at home. I had some of the biggest pulls I'd ever had at home. And then when I went on the road, it didn't pan out.
yeah. And I think sometimes knowing the number two is a detriment. I know when I did some of my, like you're always gonna know your opener because you put it in, and then I would always have, my best squat. My best squats were when somebody else called it. Like, don't tell me the number. I'm not even listening to the announcer. Don't even tell me the number. Because if I knew the number, then I was like, okay, I know the number I want. This isn't it. So if I don't get it, I'm a chump. you know. But if it's the number I want, I don't get it. It's like, oh crap! Just I never liked. Yeah, looking back, I never liked knowing the number. Just whatever you saw me do. Okay, crush the opener. I got it. It's like just call it. I'll do it. And I just would just kind of take the steps. Go through the steps of setup, get as angry as I could, stand up with it, squat, boom, whatever it is, bench, boom. But don't let me know the number. That's when I did it. But that takes also someone handling that.
Well, Pete, we've got to be friends over the last, I don't know, year and a half or whatever it is. And we kind of traded out the coaching on one side for coaching on the other. And I can't thank you enough for all that you did this last 6 months. Hopefully I was able to return some of it and some other coaching endeavors, but
Yeah.
I'll put this out as, a bonus episode. And then to tie along with it, I'll post some of the videos of the progress we made and some of the things we did, and I'll put them on Instagram so people can maybe see some of the things we were talking about, and
Yeah.
we'll just see how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm tremendously appreciative that you allowed me to coach you as well. Because you can, I mean, probably with the with your Rolodex, you could have looked, you could have shown so many others, but really appreciate it.
I had a blast doing it, and I gained more as a coach probably than I did as a lifter.
Well, round two, we'll gain more as a lifter. I promise. We'll try
Either
that 9-day cycle and go from there.
and that's fine, but at the end of the day, I'm probably happier with the progress I made as a coach, because my lifting days, you're battling time. I'm not going to break any
Yeah.
world records, but I might
No.
be able to coach for a long time and
Oh,
see some,
for sure.
and see some guys do some great things. So that's where the improvement was the best for me.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Take away all types of things from it. It's awesome.
Well, man, we'll get up there to Chicago and see you again before too long.
Yeah.
But thanks for sitting down and doing this.
Absolutely. Thank you, man.